Okay, welcome back, kiddos. Now we're going to talk about 9.2 special right triangles. So we're going to talk about 45, 45, 90 special right triangles. So these are special types. So first off, go ahead and scan this with your computer. So that will pull up our calculator that we want to use. Okay, so I can push this right over here to clear everything if I want to clear all. Okay, boom. Look at that. All right, so let's talk about that. Okay, so a 45, 45, 90 triangle. What is that? Okay, so our essential question is what's the relationship between the side lengths of a 45, 45, 90? So we see this over here, 45, 45, and we know that's 90 degrees. So that's a 45, 45, 90. How is it created? Okay, well, it's created when a square is cut in half diagonally. Diagonally. Okay? So if we look at this square over here, right? Okay? So we know if it's a square that has a 90-degree angle there, right? Um, and then actually, in fact, it's going to have 90 degrees all the way around, right? Because it's a square. That's what we know about a square. Okay? Now, we also know a square has all sides that are the same, right? And so that we can indicate that all sides are the same by doing that, right? So we said it's going to cut it in half diagonally. So imagine we had this. That's diagonally, right? Right? So if I cut that diagonally, I have two triangles, right? This triangle and this triangle. And they're both exactly the same, right? Now, what do we notice? If this is 90 and it cuts right in the half, right? That means that much is 45 and that much is 45, right? And then if that cuts that, then that's much 45 and that's much 45. So, when we cut a square in half, it creates a 45, 45, 90 special right triangle. Okay, so we call it special because when we know that, we know the side lengths. Okay, so first off, I know this side is going to be equal to this, right? So if I say that's just x, right, then this also is x because they're both sides of a square, right? So both of those are equal. The hypotenuse, right? We know the hypotenuse is right across from our 90-degree angle, right? We're going to label that one h. Here's how we calculate that. The hypotenuse is square root of 2 times as long as each leg. Okay, so this is square root of 2 times as long as that. So what we'd say is x times the square root of 2, right? Well, that's written as x square root of 2. Okay, so that's how we got there. Okay, so all we do is we take the leg and we multiply it times the square root of 2. And so that's the basics of what we're doing today. So we will see, just manipulate that today, and we'll see how well that works. Okay. So once we just practice. Okay. So hopefully this is making more sense as we see it again. All answers have to be in simplified form when we're talking about radicals. So it means a radical cannot have any perfect squares other than one, right? So we ask ourselves, what's the largest perfect square that goes into that? Square root of 12, right? So we would say, okay, 12 divided by 2 gives us 6. So then we would say 12 divided by 4, right, which is equal to 3. So that would tell us that we would use, right, so this is no on that one, right? So that would tell us we're going to use square root of 4 times the square root of 3, right? And then that pops out into 2 square roots of 3. Okay, so that is good. Okay, that is good. That is bad. Okay, so that's not simplified. Now, it can't have a fraction inside there. That's bad. No. Okay, and the denominator cannot have a radical symbol, right? So if we had square root of 12, right, then we said we multiply that times square root of 12 over square root of 12, which would equal square root of 12 over 12, right? Then we said the square root of 12 was actually 2 square roots of 3, right, over 12. And then we said that these would reduce into 1/6, right? So that would be square root of 3 over 6. Okay, so keeping that in mind, let's get right into today's lesson. All right, so we're talking about finding the side lengths in special 45, 45, 90 triangles. So this only happens in this, okay? as far as the square root of 2. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is label the hypotenuse. So I look over here, okay, and I see my 90-degree angle. I'll go right across to the middle of the other one. I'm going to label that one H for my hypotenuse. Okay, so now let's think. This is what we do if we're trying to find the hypotenuse. This is if we're trying to find the leg. Okay, so if we're going to either multiply or divide by square root of 2. Okay, so we label our hypotenuse. Now we're going to ask ourselves, is this a 45, 45, 90 triangle? And it has 45, 45, and 90. So yes, it is, right? It is a 45, 45, 90. Okay, so now we're going to ask ourselves, do we multiply or divide by square root of 2? So if we're trying to find the hypotenuse, right, that tells us we're finding the hypotenuse, then we need to multiply times square root of 2. Okay, so x is going to be equal to the leg multiplied times the square root of 2. So I'm going to say 4 times the square root of 2, right, which is just 4 square roots of 2. And that is my answer. Okay, so as long as we understand that relationship, we're just asking ourselves, do we multiply or divide? So if they give us the leg, given both legs, right, if I know that's 4, then I know that's 4 as well, right? Okay, because it's 45, 45, 90. So give that, I'm going to multiply. Now, conversely, okay, let's look at this problem. They want, and of course they said rational denominator. This one, let's ask ourselves, is that simple? Are there any perfect squares other than 1? 2 is the lowest, right? It has no fractions inside there, and it's not on the bottom of a fraction, so that's good, right? Now, let's look over here. Let's label our hypotenuse. That's our hypotenuse, right? Now, is it a 45, 45, 90? 45, 45, 90. So, yes, it is. Okay. Next, ask ourselves, do we multiply or divide? Okay. So, if we're finding the side lengths, right, we want to find this. If you're finding the side lengths and you're given one leg, right, right, we're given this and the hypotenuse, right, that's our hypotenuse, we're going to divide by square root of 2. So this one we multiplied, this one we're going to divide. So we're going to say x is equal to, right, instead of multiplying, we're going to divide. So we're going to take that hypotenuse, which is the square root of 10, and we're going to divide by the square root of 2. Okay? Now, here's a little trick, okay? So, square root of AB is the same thing as square root of A times the square root of B. Okay, so that's why the square root of 100 is equal to the square root of 50 times the square root of 2, right? Makes sense. Okay, so similarly, the square root of A over the square root of B is equal to the square root of A over B. Okay? So that means if I had the square root of 100 over the square root of 20, that would be equal to the square root of 5. Okay, because 100 divided by 20 is 5. So, knowing that, if I had the square root of 10 divided by the square root of 2, that's going to be equal to the square root of 5. Okay, and if we don't know for sure, I can type it into my calculator, right? I'm going to push square root of 10 over square root of 2, okay, just to check myself, and that gets a weird number, right? So let me see if that's the same thing as the square root of 5. So I'm going to put over here square root of 5. And as we see, it's the exact same thing. So I know that's my correct answer. Okay? But that's how the trick that we can do it. If we have the radical, if they divide evenly, we can just do it just like that. Okay? Now, let's keep it moving to the next page. All right? So let's look over here. Okay, so it says find the, so once again, we talked about this. Okay, if we're finding the side hypotenuse lengths, we need to multiply. If we're finding the leg lengths, we need to divide. All right, so find the leg in simple statistical form. So is it 45, 45, 90? Yes, it is 45, 45, 90. Okay, so let's label our hypotenuse. Okay, so if that's that, then this is our hypotenuse, right? So we're trying to find the hypotenuse, so we're going to multiply it. So we're going to say x is equal to square root of 3, right, times the square root of 2. Okay, so if we remember what we talked about earlier, we said the square root of a times the square root of b is equal to the square root of a times b. Okay, so that means x is equal to the square root of 6. Okay, then we ask ourselves, will 6 divide by our largest perfect square? 4 won't go evenly, right? So that is our final answer. It's simplified. Okay, all right, hopefully it's making more sense. Let's see if you can at least set this one up. All right, so hopefully you tried to set this one up. We would say that's our hypotenuse, right? Okay, so if we are trying to find the hypotenuse, okay, we're going to multiply. So we're going to say x is equal to square root of 10, right, times the square root of 2. Okay, now let's keep going. So that's going to be equal to the square root of 20, right? Okay, now though, we need to see if that's our final answer or not. Now we need to simplify it, right? So we're going to ask ourselves, what's half of 20, right? So we're going to say 20 divided by 2 is 10. Okay, so that tells us where we need to look on our chart, right? So we can just try the numbers less than 10. So we're going to say 20 divided by 9, right? And that doesn't work. So then we're going to say 20 divided by 4, and that works. 4 and 5, right? So it's going to be equal to the square root of 4 times the square root of 5, okay, right? Then we're going to pop out our square root of 4, which is 2, and we're going to bring down our square roots of 5. So that's our answer. Okay, so that's from our practice from last time. Hopefully it makes it a lot easier now. Okay, so that's all we did. I multiplied that times the square root of 2, so we know that that's square root of 20 and goes from there. All right, so try this last one, see how much you can do on your own. At least try to set it up. All right, so let's look. Where's our hypotenuse? That's our hypotenuse right there, right? And it's a 45, 45, 90 special right triangle. So if we're given the hypotenuse and we're trying to find the leg, we need to divide. So we're going to say x is equal to our hypotenuse of 12 divided by the square root of 2. Okay, but we talked about that. We cannot have the square root, a radical symbol on the bottom, right? That's what we just practiced. So we need to do the square root of 2 over the square root of 2, right? Okay, so that's going to be equal to, let's go and set up our new fraction, right? We're going to multiply that on top. 12 times the square root of 2 is written as 12 square roots of 2. Okay, now the bottom, square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is just 2, right? Not square root of 2, just 2. It's a common mistake otherwise, right? Now we know what to do. We need to try to reduce that 12 divided by 2, right? If we're not sure, we just put 12 divided by 2, and we remember that 12 divided by 2 is 6. So that means our answer is going to be 6, right? Square roots of 2. And that's our answer. All right, so hopefully that makes perfect sense to you. We're just either going to multiply if we're trying to find the hypotenuse. We're going to divide if we're trying to find the leg. And then we are going to ask ourselves, do we need to simplify it? Or is it already simplified? If it has an irrational denominator, we need to rationalize that denominator. All right, so let's put this together. It says, sketch the figure that is described. The length of a diagonal in a square is 32 inches. Find the perimeter. So let's circle that. Let's underline that. Okay, what does perimeter mean? Perimeter means add all side lengths, right? So it'd be a lot easier if we had a picture, right? But they don't have one. That's okay. Let's just draw one. We can draw one square, right? So we know that's that. It says the diagonal is 32. Draw that in. Diagonal is 32. You got that? Diagonal is 32, right? We know that's 32. Okay, so what is this angle right here? That's 45, right? What's this angle right here? If it cuts that, that's 45 also. So we're dealing with a 45, 45, 90 triangle, right? So they want us to find the perimeter. Well, if we need to add all the side lengths, how would we solve that problem? Well, we need to calculate these side lengths. Now, being a square, how about I put that for x, right? Now, being a square, they're all going to be x, right? So if I find out x, I just add them all up to get that perimeter, right? So let's do it. So we said if we are given the hypotenuse and we're trying to find the leg, we are going to divide by the square root of 2. So let's do that. So we're going to say x is equal to 32 divided by the square root of 2, right? We said we're going to divide, but now we need to simplify that, right? We have to rationalize that denominator. So we're going to multiply times the square root of 2 over the square root of 2, right? So that's equal to, let's go across the top, right? This is going to be 32 times square root of 2 is written as 32 square roots of 2. Right? Square root of 2 times square root of 2 is written as just 2. Okay, now let's reduce it. Okay, so 32 divided by 2, put that in our calculator, is 16. Right? Oh, that's not our final answer. That's a side, right? So the side is, let's just circle that for right now. So that's the side is that. So the perimeter, we said perimeter is adding them all, right? So the perimeter is equal to 16 square roots of 2 plus 16 square roots of 2 plus 16 square roots of 2 plus 16 square roots of 2, right? Well, how much is that? Well, let's think of it like this. We have 16 square roots of 2 plus 16 more plus 16 more plus 16 more, right? So what that means is we would say 16 plus 16 plus 16 plus 16, or 16 times what? 4 is 64 square roots of 2. Okay, so that means our answer is 64 square roots of 2. Okay, so sorry it's a little jumbled like that, but hopefully that makes sense, right? So we know it's a diagonal, so to find the side lengths, we're going to divide by the square root of 2. So then we need to rationalize the denominator. Once we find that side length, we know that's not our answer, but 4 of those, so we add them up, 4 square roots of those equals that. All right, now let's keep it moving. Find the area of this figure. What do we know about this figure? All 4 sides are the same, and that's 90 degrees, so that's called a square, right? So let's talk about that. The area of a square is what? It's base times height, right? Okay, so if we know this and that, they're both the same, right? So that's going to be the base, right? And if that's the height, but either way, it's the same thing. We just need to multiply those. So what do we know? That's a diagonal, right? So that's a hypotenuse. We're trying to find the leg, right? So we're trying to find the leg. We are going to divide by that square root of 2, right? So let's do it. Okay, so we're going to say x is equal to our hypotenuse, right, of 8 divided by the square root of 2. But our lesson tells us we can't have that, right? So we need to rationalize that. So we're going to say the square root of 2 over square root of 2. Okay, so let's multiply across the top. Okay, so across the top, 8 times the square root of 2 is 8 square roots of 2, right? Then square root of 2 times square root of 2 is 2, right? So now let's reduce that. 8 divided by 2, right? 8 divided by 2 is 4, right? Square roots of 2. Okay, but that's not our final answer. That's just what x is, right? Now we need to find the area is going to be x, this base times height, right? So if that's the base and the height, that's going to be 4 square roots of 2 times 4 square roots of 2, right? So let's just put that in our calculator just like that. 4 square roots of 2 times 4 square roots of 2. So we're going to say 4 square roots of 2. I'm going to go to the right times, so if you notice how it looks, it needs to look like that, 4 square roots of 2, right? And that's equal to 32. Right? So that's our answer is 32. And since we're doing area, we're going to say square feet, right? 32 square feet. That's our answer. Okay, now this, what were they asking on that? Let's label that one. They were asking for perimeter, right? And they said inches, so this many inches. Okay. Well, what if they want that one in a the same way, right? Let's make that into inches. So let's type that into our calculator. Because if you went to the hardware store and you say, I need a piece of wood 64 square to 2 inches long, they look at you crazy, right? So let's make that into a real number. Let's say 64 square roots of 2 is actually this, right? So we'd say, okay, I need 90.5 inches. Okay, so both of these are the same answer. Okay, because we can't use that in the real world. Nobody would know that, so we convert it to that. But that's why we use our calculator. All right, so now our last one. Pause. Let's read through it, and then I want you to see how much you can do on your own. This is our last one, so the toughest one putting it together. A tipping platform in a ramp. I'm sorry. A tipping flat platform is a ramp used to unload trucks. Okay, so this is a tipping platform. Okay, so it's a ramp used to unload this truck. Okay, how high is the end of an 80-foot ramp when the tipping angle is 45 degrees? Okay, so they're asking how high is this, right? So that's our x. They want to find out how much is this when this is 45, right? When that's 45 degrees. Okay, so how do we know? What else? It says the ramp is 80, so that's the ramp, right? So that much is 80, right? So what do we know about this? Is this 45, 45, 90? Well, let's look. This is 90, right? And that's 45. If that's 90 and that's 45, this has to be 45 also, right? Because we would say 180 minus 90 minus 45, and that would have to be equal to 45, right? So that's how we came up with, that's how I came up with that number, right? Okay, so now it's a 45, 45, 90. Now I can use my tools to figure out what this is. So is that a leg or is that the hypotenuse? This is the hypotenuse, right? So that's the leg. So if we're trying to find the leg, we're going to divide by the square root of 2, right? If we're trying to find the leg. So let's do that. So we're going to say x equals 80, right? Divided by the square root of 2. But we can't do that square root of 2, right? So we're going to do the square root of 2 over the square root of 2. So that means on top, 80 times the square root of 2 is going to be 80 square roots of 2. Okay, on the bottom, square root of 2 times square root of 2 is 2. Okay, let's look on top. 80 divided by 2. What's half of 80? That's 40. All right, so 40 square roots of 2. But they want to know how high it is, right? That doesn't make sense. You can't say it's that many feet high, right? So let's go and convert that. Let's type that into our calculator. 40 square roots of 2. And so that tells us it's approximately 56.57 feet. Okay, and that's our answer. Okay, so the basics of it today with the 45, 45, 90 is we just need to see, are we trying to find the hypotenuse or trying to find the leg? Either going to multiply or divide. And we have to remember that we cannot have a denominator that has a radical. So we're going to rationalize that denominator by multiplying it times the denominator over itself. Then we're going to simplify the top. Then we're going to simplify the rest. Okay, so I know you got this. If you have any questions, just let me know.